Hi, friends. We are stepping into week 23, and we are on our final week of verbals. And so I wanted to give a quick overview of what we've talked about previously, and then dig into gerunds today. And so first of all, what I'd like to do is just remind you what a verbal is. And a verbal is simply a verb. It is a verb, though, and instead of acting like a verb and behaving itself, it is doing the job of a different part of speech. We've talked with our friend Verbal the Gerbil, and so he's a verb, but sometimes he likes to dress up in costumes, and sometimes he likes to act like a noun or an adjective or an adverb. But if we were to just look at him, we'd say, you are definitely a verb, and that's how verbals are. If we take them out of the sentence, out of context, we would say that they're verbs. When we put them in the context of a sentence, suddenly we think, oh, that's not doing the job of a verb anymore. This word is doing a different job. So what I'd like to do is just take a quick peek, first of all, and look at some of our definitions, because I think it's going to really help us to take a look first just at verbals, their definition, and take a look at some of these parts that we talk about before we go in and dig into the definition. So a couple of things you're going to need. One would be chart D. That's going to be very helpful for us today as we're looking at this, and also chart Q. I'm going to pull up chart Q later, but if you could have that handy, you can kind of refer to it as we move along. So first of all, I just want to look at these parts of a verb. We've talked about this in class, we've touched on them, but just to review, what we're going to focus on when we're talking about verbals are three different parts of a verb. And we're going to talk about the infinitives. Those are to plus a verb. That's like this: to jump, to read, to break. It's called the base form of a verb. So anytime you have a verb and we put the word to in front of it, it's called an infinitive. When we have an infinitive in a sentence, it often looks like a prepositional phrase because we have that little to there. But when there's a verb following the word to, it is no longer a prepositional phrase. It is an infinitive. So be on the lookout for those: to jump, to read, to break, and all down this list on chart D. You can read some more. Then we have another form of a verb called the present participle. When we talk about the present participle, we are talking about a verb with an ing ending. Look at this. To jump, the infinitive becomes jumping when we add an ing. To read becomes reading, and to break becomes breaking. These are verb forms with an ing ending. In a sentence, they require a helping verb. So here's a hint. If you ever see a present participle verb in a sentence without a helping verb, it's probably a verbal. It's probably doing a different job in the sentence. And then finally, we have those past participles. These are verbs that have an ed ending, usually if they're regular, but those irregular verbs can end in en or t. These you can find by taking the helping verb have and putting it in past tense. So for instance, to jump, I am jumping, I have jumped. To read, I am reading, I have read. That's the past participle. To break, I am breaking, I have broken. These are past participles. So as we're looking at these verbals and we're talking about them with their definitions, we need to understand these parts. So there's the infinitive, the present participle, that's a verb plus ing, or the past participle, usually ed, but we have a lot of those irregular verbs that might end in en or a t, okay, or just a completely different form, like with the word read, okay, I read. So, excuse me, let's go ahead and look first. Well, let's review this definition. So a verbal, what's a verbal? Sorry, my bouncy screen. A verbal is a verb that is used as another part of speech. We see it outside of a sentence, we say, that's a verb. We see it in the sentence and we think, well, that's weird. It's not asserting an action. It's a verbal, it's doing a different job. And Verbal the Gerbil likes to dress up. He has three costumes. He has a costume called an infinitive, a participle, or a gerund. And we're going to talk about each one of those. So first, we're going to review from week 21 when we talked about an infinitive. Remember, an infinitive is to plus a verb, and it can be used as a noun an adjective, or an adverb. So let's take a look at these sentences. To love is important. What's important? To love. Here, to love, the infinitive is being used as a subject noun. Remember, an infinitive is to plus a verb used as a noun, adjective, or adverb. I like to write. I like what? To write. There's not an action happening here. We're just naming something. We're naming what we like. So this is a direct object. I like to write, an infinitive used as a noun, to love or to write. And remember, those nouns have all different kinds of jobs that they can do in a sentence. Here is an example, a subject noun and a direct object. They're both naming things. This verb isn't an action word here, it's a naming word. So that's why it's called an infinitive. Here is an example of an infinitive used as an adjective. I have dinner to cook. What kind of dinner? To cook. That answers the question, what kind? And so here, we ask what kind of dinner? The kind of dinner to cook. Here's the infinitive acting like an adjective. And then finally, this paper is challenging to write. Under what condition is it challenging? That I have to write it. So here, to write is acting as an adverb because it's answering an adverb question. So all of these are called infinitives. To plus a verb used as a noun, an adjective, or adverb. That was from week 21. That was when verbal the gerbil dressed up as an infinitive, to plus a verb. Okay. Then this last week in week 22, we talked about participles. Now a participle, remember, could be present or past. If it's a present participle, it begins with, or it ends with ing. If it's a past participle and it's regular, it's just an ed. If it's irregular, it could be an en or a t. So we're going to be on the lookout for those. Let's look at these examples. Infinitives are always used as adjectives. So, excuse me, not infinitives, participles. When it's called a participle, it means it's being used as an adjective. Okay, so this is where it gets a little confusing when we get into gerunds, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But if you see a present participle verb form used as an adjective, it is called a participle. So let's look at this. The jumping child broke his wrist on the trampoline. What kind of child? The jumping child. It's not an action here, it's a describing word telling me what kind of child. Don't awaken a sleeping giant. What kind of giant? The sleeping giant. The delighted mother received flowers. What kind of mother? A delighted mother. The decayed tooth caused a great deal of pain. What kind of tooth? Decayed. Again, if we took these words out of context, jumping, sleeping, delighted, decayed, we would say they are verbs. But in the context of these sentences, they're doing a different job. They're dressing up like adjectives. They're describing nouns. These are all descriptive adjectives. Those are participles. And then finally, we're in week 23. And in week 23, we're going to talk about gerunds. And what is a gerund? A gerund is a present participle verb form used as a noun. Those present participle verb forms are any verb that has that ing ending. Okay? So look at this. Writing is fun. What is fun? Writing. There's not an action here. Writing is a noun. It is doing the job in this sentence of a subject noun, because remember, jobs have all kinds of, nouns have all kinds of jobs they can do. In this case, we have a subject noun. So writing is a verb, verbal the gerbil. He dressed up, he put an ing on, and he's acting like a noun. He is a great actor, isn't he? Look at this. I love dancing. I love what? Dancing. It's not something that's happening in the sentence. It's not the action. The action is love. Dancing is a naming word in the sentence. What do you love? Dancing. It's the direct object. The judges awarded her painting first prize. I wonder if you've ever thought about painting as being a gerund. We all recognize this word. But if you think about paint, that's a verb. Painting in this sentence is a gerund. It's a noun. The judges awarded her painting first prize. The judges awarded what? A prize. To whom or what? The painting. The painting is a naming word. It's naming what received the prize. Look at the next one. By writing, they communicated often. Here we have a prepositional phrase, by writing. And we know that a prepositional phrase begins with a preposition and ends with the object of the preposition. So in this case, writing is a verb form ending in ing. It's a present participle, but it's doing the job of a noun. And so we call it a gerund. And finally, his favorite subject in school is reading. Well, let's see. The subject is reading. Subject is the subject of the sentence. Is a linking verb. Subject is what? Reading. That's his favorite subject. There's no one doing the action of reading in this sentence. Reading is a naming word. It is doing the job of a noun. So remember that gerunds are present participle verbs, and a present participle verb is one that has an ing ending, and they do the job of a noun. They name something instead of showing us an action. And remember what I said, sometimes it's confusing when we're talking about verbals to figure out, is it a participle or is it a gerund? Because both of those can end in ing. It's very simple. Participles are adjectives. They're describing nouns. Gerunds are nouns. They're naming words. So look for those in the sentences. I do want to take a moment. I want to take a look at chart Q, because chart Q definitely helps us out. And chart Q helps us to see how these verbals are diagrammed. So if we look at an infinitive, notice here that the infinitive to is, first of all, the whole thing is up on stilts because it's the subject, okay? It's the subject of a sentence, and that's where the subject goes, then that is how we diagram the infinitive. And it kind of looks like a prepositional phrase. To is on that diagonal, that fly is on the flat line. To fly. That is how we would diagram an infinitive. And you're going to put it on stilts wherever it would belong in the sentence. So if you had an infinitive doing the job over here of a predicate nominative, you would place it over here, or as a predicate adjective. So it just goes on stilts, and then it has that slanted line and then a flat line. That is how you diagram an infinitive. Let's look at gerunds. That's what we talked about today. With a gerund, you have a little stair step. See that? And then flying just kind of, it's harder to do in type. It's a little bit easier to kind of, it's just kind of falling off the stairs, okay? Remember, a gerund, you will only do this when you have an ing verb and whatever job it's doing in the noun, in the sentence. So here it's a subject noun, so it goes where the subject normally would in the diagram. If we were renaming over here and it was a predicate nominative, it would go on stilts over here with that same little stair step, okay? And then finally with a participle, that's what we talked about week 22 with that sling. So here we have flying machines. Look, this is an adjective, and we're just saying, hey, it is an adjective. It's modifying machines. What kind of machines? Flying machines. I'm going to put it in a sling to show that I know that this is a verbal. It's a verb dressed up as an adjective. Okay. Up here, since it's a predicate adjective, this is where the predicate adjective normally goes. But I want to show that I know this is a verb and it's dressing up like an adjective. And so I put it in that sling. So study chart Q. That's one to definitely memorize. Hopefully this has taken the mystery out of verbals for you. I hope that if you have any questions, you would feel free to ask them. Go ahead and study chart D. That's going to help you study chart Q. Get used to, what does that mean? What's an infinitive? What's a present participle? What's a past participle? When you understand those definitions, then you can go to the verbals and understand what it means when we talk about infinitives and participles and gerunds. Let me know if you have any questions, and have fun this week diagramming and talking about the sentences.